Fix my Ferrari, and I'll marry you. The words drifted across the crowded town square on a warm Saturday afternoon, followed by a ripple of laughter from people who assumed the joke was harmless. What nobody knew was that in less than 10 minutes, that joke would uncover a secret worth far more than the bright red Ferrari parked beside the fountain. The summer sun reflected off the polished curves of the car as Victoria Hayes folded her arms and watched the man standing across from her. She was the billionaire CEO everyone recognized from magazine covers and business podcasts. He was Ethan Walker, a quiet single dad in a faded work shirt with grease stains on the sleeves. To most people, they looked like they belonged in completely different worlds. Well, Victoria asked with a playful smile, can you fix it or not? Ethan glanced at the Ferrari, then at the small crowd gathering around them. A few people pulled out their phones. Others whispered among themselves. Ferraris did not usually break down in towns like this. Depends on what's wrong with it, Ethan said calmly. That sounds like mechanic talk for maybe, one man joked. More laughter followed. Victoria shook her head. I already had 2 specialists look at it this week. Nobody could figure it out. If you solve it, maybe I'll keep my promise. The crowd laughed again. Ethan didn't. He simply walked toward the Ferrari and rested one hand on the hood. The noise around him faded into the background. He moved with the quiet confidence of someone who had spent years listening to machines tell stories nobody else could hear. The afternoon breeze carried the scent of fresh coffee from a nearby cafe. Children chased each other near the fountain. Somewhere down the street, a country song drifted from an open diner door. For a moment, everything felt ordinary. Then Ethan released the hood latch. The metal clicked softly. He lifted the hood and looked inside. His expression changed immediately. The smile lines vanished from his face. His shoulders stiffened. And for the first time since Victoria arrived, he seemed genuinely concerned. What is it? She asked. Ethan didn't answer. He leaned closer, studying something hidden beneath a bundle of wiring near the firewall. The crowd noticed the change in him. Their laughter faded. Victoria stepped forward. Did you find something? Still no answer. Ethan's eyes remained fixed on a small component buried deep inside the engine compartment. It did not belong there. He knew it the instant he saw it. Every wire, every connector, every factory placement. He recognized them all. This was different. Deliberate. Wrong. A silence settled over the gathering. Not the uncomfortable silence of embarrassment, but the kind that appears when people sense they are witnessing the beginning of something important. Victoria felt a chill despite the 80-degree heat. Ethan, she said more quietly. He finally straightened and looked directly at her. The confidence in his eyes remained, but now it was mixed with something heavier. Concern, calculation, truth. Around them, even the traffic seemed to slow. The crowd waited. Victoria waited. Ethan glanced back toward the engine one more time before speaking. His voice was low, steady, and impossible to ignore. Ms. Hayes, he said, who put this in your car? Victoria stared at him, the confidence that usually carried her through boardrooms and television interviews suddenly slipping away. What do you mean? She asked. Ethan glanced around at the crowd gathering closer to the Ferrari. Not here, he said quietly. Pop the trunk and hand me the key. One man laughed nervously. Come on, what is it? Another stepped forward, trying to get a better look. Ethan closed the hood carefully. Nothing that belongs in a factory-built Ferrari. The laughter disappeared completely. Victoria studied his face. He was not trying to impress anyone. He was not performing. If anything, he looked like a man who wished he had never found what he had just seen. Tell me, she said. Ethan shook his head. First, answer a question. Has the car been acting strange? Victoria hesitated. A few times. How? The braking felt delayed once. The dashboard reset itself last week. My navigation system started showing locations I never entered. Ethan nodded slowly. Anything else? She frowned as she thought about it. A warning light appeared 3 days ago and disappeared before the dealership could inspect it. Ethan exhaled. The summer breeze moved through the square, rustling flags hanging from storefronts. Somewhere nearby, a church bell rang the half hour. The ordinary sounds felt strangely distant now. That is not a coincidence, Ethan said. Victoria folded her arms. You are telling me someone tampered with my car? I am telling you somebody installed something that should not be there. The crowd exchanged uneasy looks. One of the teenagers recording lowered his phone. Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out a clean shop rag. Open the passenger door. Victoria obeyed without argument. That surprised even her. She was used to giving instructions, not following them. Ethan leaned inside and connected a small handheld diagnostic scanner from his toolbox. The screen flickered to life. Lines of data rolled across the display. His eyes moved quickly over the information. The crowd remained silent. There, Ethan murmured. That should not exist. Victoria stepped closer. What are you seeing? Commands. Commands from what? Ethan looked up. Something communicating with your vehicle from outside the system. Her expression tightened. Can that happen? Not by accident. He disconnected the scanner and carefully placed it back into his toolbox. The sunlight reflected across the Ferrari's red paint while a cloud drifted over the square, softening the brightness of the afternoon. Ethan looked at the car the way a doctor might look at a patient carrying a hidden illness. If you had continued driving without finding this, he said, you could have experienced a major system failure at highway speed. Victoria felt a chill move through her chest. You mean the car could stop working? I mean, I would not trust it with a trip across town. For a moment, neither spoke. Victoria Hayes had built a company worth billions of dollars. She negotiated international contracts without blinking. Yet standing beside that Ferrari, she felt something unfamiliar. Vulnerability. Ethan noticed it immediately. His voice softened. Do not panic. The car is here now. Can you remove it? She asked. Maybe. Whoever installed it knew exactly where to hide it. Victoria looked at him carefully. And you know exactly where to find it. Ethan held her gaze for a moment before looking away. I have seen things like this before. The answer raised more questions than it solved. The crowd slowly began to disperse, sensing the joke was over. Victoria watched Ethan load his tools into the back of an aging pickup truck parked near the curb. Then she noticed something that made her pause. Tucked beside the toolbox was a framed photograph of a smiling little girl. Ethan followed her eyes and closed the tailgate gently. Ms. Hayes, he said, if you want the truth about what is inside that Ferrari, you should let me take a closer look. Because right now, I do not think your car is the real problem. Ethan drove slowly through the late afternoon streets with the Ferrari following behind him at a careful distance. Victoria had insisted on staying close, unwilling to let the mysterious discovery out of her sight. The small town gradually gave way to a quieter stretch of road lined with old oak trees, weathered fences, and modest homes that seemed untouched by the frantic pace of the corporate world she knew. After 10 minutes, they turned into a gravel driveway leading to a simple garage with a faded sign that read Walker Auto Service. There was nothing remarkable about the place at first glance. No polished showroom, no luxury branding, just honest work and years of quiet perseverance. Ethan parked his pickup beside the garage and stepped out. Victoria followed, looking around. The building sat beside a small white house with a wide front porch. Flower boxes rested beneath the windows. Wind chimes swayed gently in the breeze. It felt warm, lived in, real. Before either of them could speak, the front door burst open. A young girl with long blonde hair raced down the porch steps carrying a sketchbook. Dad, she called. Ethan's serious expression softened immediately. Hey, kiddo. She threw her arms around him and he hugged her tightly. Victoria noticed the change. The quiet mechanic who had seemed guarded and distant in town suddenly looked lighter, almost peaceful. Did you finish your science project? Ethan asked. The girl grinned. I got an A. I knew you would. And Mrs. Parker said my volcano was the best one. Ethan laughed. Now that is impressive. Only then did the girl notice Victoria standing nearby. Who is she? She whispered loudly enough for everyone to hear. Ethan smiled. Lily, this is Victoria Hayes. Lily's eyes widened. The Victoria Hayes? Victoria laughed softly. I guess that depends on which one you mean. The one from television. Victoria nodded. That would be me. Lily looked at her father with obvious amazement. Dad, that is a really big deal. Ethan shrugged. She has a car problem. Victoria found herself smiling. Most people treated her status like something extraordinary. Ethan treated it like a detail. The simplicity was refreshing. Lily held up her sketchbook. Do you want to see my drawings? Victoria expected Ethan to tell her daughter not to bother a guest. Instead, he said, only if Victoria wants to. To her own surprise, she did. They sat together on the porch steps while Lily flipped through page after page of colorful sketches. Some showed animals. Others showed landscapes. One depicted a bright red sports car flying through space beside a rocket ship. That one is my favorite, Lily said proudly. Victoria laughed. I think your Ferrari has a better future than mine right now. The little girl giggled. The sound carried through the yard like sunlight. For a brief moment, Victoria forgot about board meetings, investors, and quarterly reports. She simply sat there listening to a child explain why every drawing needed at least one hidden star somewhere in the picture. The air smelled faintly of fresh-cut grass. Birds chirped from nearby trees. The world felt slower here. Kinder somehow. Eventually, Ethan returned from the garage carrying a set of tools. Lily, homework before dinner. 5 more minutes. 3. Deal. She ran back toward the house. Victoria watched her go. She is wonderful. Ethan nodded. She keeps me honest. There was a brief silence. Not awkward. Just thoughtful. Victoria looked toward the garage. You built a good life here. Ethan followed her gaze. It is not a big life. Sometimes those are the best kind. Ethan said nothing. He simply opened the garage door and motioned toward the Ferrari. As sunlight stretched across the concrete floor, Victoria noticed dozens of framed certificates hanging on the far wall. Her eyes narrowed. The names on them were partially hidden in shadow. But even from a distance, she could tell one thing. The quiet mechanic she had met in town was not who he appeared to be. Victoria stepped into the garage and allowed her eyes to adjust to the softer light inside. The building was larger than it appeared from the road. Every tool had its place. Every workbench was spotless. Shelves were organized with almost military precision. Nothing felt random. Nothing felt careless. Ethan rolled the Ferrari toward the center bay and switched on a row of overhead lights. Their warm glow spread across the polished concrete floor. You keep this place cleaner than most corporate offices, Victoria said. Ethan smiled faintly. Machines deserve respect. You say that like they are people. Sometimes people are harder to understand. Victoria laughed quietly. It was the first genuine laugh she had experienced all day. Ethan returned to the Ferrari and removed a protective panel beneath the dashboard. His movements were calm and methodical. Watching him work reminded Victoria of watching a concert pianist approach a familiar song. There was no wasted motion, no uncertainty, just quiet confidence. As he worked, Victoria's attention drifted back to the certificates hanging along the far wall. She moved closer. One carried the logo of a prestigious engineering institute. Another displayed an award for automotive innovation. A third recognized contributions to advanced vehicle systems. The names were partially obscured by age and distance, but one word stood out clearly. Ferrari. Victoria blinked. Then she stepped closer. Another certificate carried the same name. So did another. Her pulse quickened. Ethan, she said slowly, why do you have Ferrari engineering awards hanging in a small-town garage? Ethan paused, but did not look up. Old history. That is not an answer. It is the only one I have. Victoria folded her arms. Most mechanics do not have international engineering awards. Most billionaires do not get stranded in my town. For a second, neither moved. Then both smiled. The tension eased. Outside, the sun continued its slow descent toward the horizon. Golden light filtered through the garage windows, painting long shadows across the floor. The scent of motor oil mixed with fresh-cut grass drifting in from the yard. Somewhere inside the house, Lily practiced piano scales. The notes floated softly through an open window. Victoria listened for a moment. She is learning fast. Ethan nodded. Her mother taught music. The answer carried a quiet weight. Victoria noticed it immediately. She must have been special. Ethan stared at a connector beneath the Ferrari's dashboard. She was. Nothing more. No dramatic explanation. No speech. Just 2 words filled with years of memory. Victoria understood enough not to press further. She looked toward the house, where the piano melody continued. My father used to play piano too. Ethan glanced up briefly. Really? Every Sunday morning. Her smile faded slightly. After he passed away, the house felt too quiet. Ethan returned his attention to the Ferrari. Sometimes silence is the loudest thing in a room. Victoria felt the truth in those words more than she expected. She spent her life surrounded by meetings, interviews, and constant communication. Yet she had never felt more alone than after losing the person who believed in her before anyone else did. For a moment, they stood in a comfortable silence. Not strangers anymore. Not friends yet. Just 2 people carrying old scars with dignity. Then Ethan's expression changed. His eyes narrowed toward a section of hidden wiring behind the center console. There you are, he whispered. Victoria stepped forward immediately. What did you find? Ethan carefully reached deeper into the compartment and revealed a small black device no larger than a deck of cards. It was attached with professional precision, hidden where almost nobody would ever notice it. Victoria stared. What is that? Ethan looked at the device, then at her. The warmth disappeared from his face. Ms. Hayes, he said quietly, this was never about your car. Somebody wanted access to your life. Victoria stared at the device resting in Ethan's hand. It looked ordinary, almost harmless, yet something about the way he held it told her otherwise. You are certain? She asked. Ethan nodded. I wish I was not. He carried the device to a workbench and placed it beneath a bright inspection lamp. The white light revealed details that had been invisible before. Tiny components, a concealed antenna, a custom casing designed to blend into the vehicle's electronics. Victoria moved closer. Can it track location? Yes. Can it access data? Potentially. Can it monitor where I go? Ethan looked up. That is exactly what it was built to do. The words settled heavily between them. Outside, evening shadows stretched across the yard. The piano inside the house had stopped. In its place came the gentle sound of Lily laughing at something on television. The ordinary comfort of the home felt strangely distant compared to the tension growing inside the garage. Victoria folded her arms tightly. Only a handful of people knew my travel schedule this week. Ethan considered that. Then whoever placed this device probably expected your Ferrari to remain close to you. Victoria paced slowly across the floor. Her mind moved through names, meetings, executives, assistants, security personnel, investors. For the first time in years, she realized she did not fully know who she could trust. Ethan remained calm. He connected the device to a diagnostic station mounted on the workbench. Screens illuminated one by one. Data began flowing across the display. Victoria watched in surprise. You have equipment for this? Old habit. Mechanics usually do not. Ethan offered a faint smile. I told you earlier. Machines tell stories. Lines of information continued appearing. Ethan studied them carefully. The garage fell quiet except for the soft hum of electronics and the distant chirping of crickets outside. Several minutes passed before he finally leaned back. What is it? Victoria asked. Ethan pointed toward the monitor. The device has been transmitting information for weeks. Her stomach tightened. Weeks? At least. Can you see where? Ethan nodded slowly. A secure server. Can you identify the owner? Not directly. Victoria exhaled in frustration. So we know someone has been watching me, but we do not know who. Ethan remained silent for a moment. Then he enlarged a section of data on the screen. Actually, we might know more than that. Victoria stepped closer. What do you mean? Ethan tapped a sequence of entries. These transmissions were not continuous. Is that important? Very. He pointed again. Whoever set this up only activated monitoring during specific events. Victoria studied the timestamps. Airport visits, board meetings, investor conferences, executive retreats, important moments, strategic moments. Her expression slowly changed. This was not random. No, Ethan's voice was steady. This was targeted. The realization sent a chill through the room. Someone had not simply wanted information. Someone had wanted access to decisions, access to plans, access to the future of her company. Victoria lowered herself onto a nearby stool. For the first time all day, she looked tired. Not physically tired, emotionally tired. Ethan noticed. You do not have to solve everything tonight. She laughed softly. That is easy for you to say. No, it is not. She looked at him. Ethan glanced toward the house, where warm light glowed through the kitchen window. Every day I wake up and solve only what that day gives me. Victoria followed his gaze. The simple wisdom caught her off guard. She had spent years carrying tomorrow before finishing today. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Ethan turned back toward the monitor. His eyes narrowed at a final line of data that had just appeared. The calm expression disappeared from his face. That is strange. Victoria immediately stood. What? Ethan stared at the screen. The last transmission from this device happened less than 2 hours ago. So, Ethan slowly looked up. So whoever is receiving this information may already know exactly where you are. Victoria felt her heartbeat quicken. She looked instinctively toward the garage windows, half expecting to see someone outside watching the house. The driveway remained empty. The road beyond the trees was quiet. Evening had settled across the countryside, painting everything in soft shades of gold and blue. "You think someone knows I am here?" she asked. Ethan kept his eyes on the screen. "I think it is possible." Possible is not exactly comforting. Truth rarely is. Victoria let out a slow breath. The calm way he said it somehow made it easier to hear. Ethan disconnected the device and placed it inside a metal storage case. Then he shut the lid firmly. Whatever information it was sending stops now. That is good. For tonight. Victoria frowned. What happens tomorrow? Ethan leaned against the workbench and folded his arms. Tomorrow someone realizes they lost access. The answer hung in the air. Outside, the first porch light flickered on automatically. Crickets filled the evening with their steady chorus. The world remained peaceful, yet the situation suddenly felt much larger than a broken Ferrari. Victoria looked around the garage again. This time her attention returned to the certificates on the wall. The questions she had ignored all afternoon demanded answers now. "Who are you really, Ethan?" she asked quietly. Ethan smiled faintly. "I am a mechanic." "No," she shook her head. "You identify advanced tracking hardware. You own equipment most research labs would envy. You understand systems that even Ferrari specialists missed." Ethan looked toward the certificates. For a long moment he said nothing. Then he walked to the wall and removed one of the framed awards. He handed it to her. Victoria read the inscription. Her eyes widened immediately. International Automotive Engineering Summit. Innovation Excellence Award. Ethan Walker. Lead Systems Architect. She looked up in disbelief. "This is real." "Yes." "Lead Systems Architect?" "A long time ago." Victoria continued reading. Several patents were listed beneath his name. Advanced Vehicle Integration. Electronic Control Systems. Performance Safety Architecture. The scope of the work was extraordinary. "You helped design technology used across the industry." Ethan nodded. "Some of it." "Then why are you here?" His gaze drifted toward the house. Warm light glowed through the kitchen window. Lily's laughter floated faintly into the evening air. "Because this is where my daughter needed me." Victoria lowered the certificate. "You walked away from all of that. After my wife passed away, priorities changed." There was no bitterness in his voice. No self-pity. Only acceptance. That somehow made the sacrifice feel even larger. Victoria stared at him. For years she had surrounded herself with ambitious people chasing bigger titles, larger offices, and greater recognition. Yet standing before her was a man who had achieved extraordinary success and quietly left it behind for something he valued more. She found herself respecting him in a way she had not expected. "You never told anyone?" she asked. Ethan shrugged. "The town knows I fix cars. And that is enough. Most days." Victoria smiled. "You are impossible." "That is what Lily tells me." Both laughed softly. The tension eased for a moment. Then Victoria's phone vibrated inside her purse. She glanced at the screen. The smile disappeared immediately. Ethan noticed. "What is it?" Victoria stared at the caller identification. Her voice dropped almost to a whisper. "That is strange. Who is calling?" She slowly looked up. "My chief operating officer." Ethan checked the clock on the wall. "At this hour?" Victoria nodded. "He never calls unless something is wrong." The phone continued vibrating. Neither moved. Outside, the wind stirred the trees. Inside the garage, the ringing seemed unnaturally loud. Then the call ended. 1 second later, a new message appeared on her screen. Victoria read it once, then twice. The color drained from her face. Ethan stepped forward. "Victoria?" She looked at him with growing disbelief. "The message says someone accessed confidential company files less than an hour ago." Ethan's expression hardened. "And where were those files stored?" Victoria swallowed. "In a project only 3 executives knew existed." The garage grew quiet. Even the crickets outside seemed distant as Victoria lowered her phone and stared at the message. Ethan watched her carefully. "3 executives?" he asked. Victoria nodded slowly. "Me, my chief operating officer, and my chief financial officer." Ethan considered that. Then whoever accessed those files either had authorization or gained access through someone who did. Victoria paced across the garage floor. Her thoughts raced through years of meetings, partnerships, and trusted relationships. The realization was unsettling. The threat was no longer theoretical. It was personal. "The project was confidential," she said. "We have been preparing it for nearly 18 months." "What kind of project?" Ethan asked. Victoria hesitated. Then she answered. a transportation platform, cleaner energy systems, advanced vehicle integration. If it succeeds, it changes the future of the company. Ethan raised an eyebrow. That would certainly attract attention. Victoria gave a humorless laugh, and apparently the wrong kind. Ethan looked toward the monitor still displaying the transmission logs. Something continued bothering him. He sat down and began comparing timestamps between the tracking device and the message on Victoria's phone. Several minutes passed. The room remained silent except for the occasional click of keys. Victoria stood beside him waiting. Finally, Ethan stopped typing. Look at this. She leaned closer. Two sets of data appeared side by side. One showed transmissions from the hidden device. The other showed activity connected to the confidential files. Victoria frowned. They happened within minutes of each other. Exactly. Ethan pointed to the screen. Someone was not just tracking your location. They were monitoring your movements to predict when you would be away from secure systems. Victoria stared at the information. The pattern was impossible to ignore. Every major transmission matched a significant business event. Every access attempt aligned with moments when her attention was somewhere else. This was planned, she whispered. Very carefully. Ethan nodded. The realization settled heavily between them. Outside, the sky darkened into deep shades of blue. The porch light cast a warm circle across the yard. Through the garage window, they could see Lily sitting at the kitchen table working on homework. The simple scene felt almost sacred compared to the complexity unfolding inside. Victoria found herself looking at Ethan again. How are you so calm? Ethan smiled faintly. Because panic never solved a problem. You make it sound easy. It is not easy. He glanced toward the house. It is practice. For a moment, Victoria understood something important about him. The quiet strength she had noticed all day was not confidence. It was discipline. The kind earned through loss, responsibility, and years of choosing grace instead of bitterness. Her phone vibrated again. This time it was a video conference request from her chief operating officer. Victoria answered immediately. The man's face appeared on the screen. He looked concerned. Victoria, thank goodness. We have a serious issue. I received your message. The board wants answers. The breach triggered internal alerts. Who knows about it? She asked. Only senior leadership. The answer should have reassured her. Instead, it raised a new question. Ethan watched silently from across the room. I want a complete activity report, Victoria said. Every access record. Every login. Every authorization. Already working on it, the executive replied. We should discuss it first thing tomorrow. No, Victoria said firmly. We discuss it tonight. The executive seemed surprised but agreed. The call ended moments later. Ethan remained thoughtful. Something wrong? Victoria asked. Ethan looked at the dark monitor where the executive's face had just disappeared. Maybe nothing. That does not sound convincing. Ethan folded his arms. When people hide information, they often talk too much. When they tell the truth, they usually talk less. Victoria stared at him. You think someone on my leadership team is involved? Ethan did not answer immediately. The wind moved gently through the trees outside. Somewhere in the distance, a train whistle echoed across the countryside. Then he looked directly at her. I think tomorrow's meeting is going to tell us more than anyone intends to reveal. The next morning arrived with a gray sky and a steady rain tapping softly against the windows of Victoria's corporate headquarters. The executive conference room on the 42nd floor overlooked the city, but few people noticed the view. Tension filled the room long before the meeting officially began. Board members sat quietly reviewing documents. Senior executives exchanged cautious glances. Victoria stood at the head of the table, calm on the outside, focused on the inside. Beside her sat Ethan. He wore the same simple work shirt and dark jacket he had worn in town. Several executives looked at him with visible confusion. One board member leaned toward another and whispered. Another checked Ethan's name on the meeting roster. Nobody knew why a small-town mechanic was present during one of the most important meetings in company history. Victoria opened the session. Thank you all for coming on short notice. The room settled. Screens illuminated around the conference table. Financial reports appeared. Security summaries followed. Then came the breach report. The atmosphere changed immediately. As you know, Victoria said, confidential project files were accessed without authorization. Murmurs spread through the room. Her chief operating officer, Daniel Mercer, adjusted his tie. We are still investigating, he said confidently. At this stage, there is no evidence that internal leadership was involved. Ethan remained silent. He simply listened. Daniel continued speaking. He sounded polished, experienced, reassuring. Every answer arrived quickly. Every explanation sounded prepared. Yet the more he spoke, the more Ethan watched him. Our security team believes external actors may be responsible, Daniel said. We should avoid speculation until the investigation concludes. Several heads nodded. Victoria glanced toward Ethan. He gave no reaction. Minutes passed. Reports were reviewed. Questions were answered. Then Daniel displayed a timeline intended to prove leadership had no connection to the breach. As you can see, he explained, none of the executive travel schedules align with the unauthorized access events. Ethan finally spoke. That is interesting. The room turned toward him. Daniel forced a polite smile. Excuse me. Ethan leaned forward slightly. You said the travel schedules do not align. Correct. Then why does this timeline use revised calendar data instead of original records? Silence. Daniel blinked. I'm not sure what you mean. Ethan looked toward the screen. Original records were modified 3 days ago. Several board members exchanged surprised looks. Daniel's expression tightened. That is impossible. Ethan calmly connected a small drive to the conference system. A new timeline appeared. The original one. Every date, every change, every modification. The room grew still. Where did you get that? Daniel asked. The same place your revisions came from, Ethan replied. Nobody spoke. Rain tapped gently against the glass walls. The city beyond seemed to disappear behind clouds. Ethan continued. The tracking device installed in Victoria's vehicle transmitted information during specific executive events. Another screen appeared showing the pattern. The unauthorized file access occurred immediately afterward. Board members leaned forward. The evidence was simple, clear, difficult to ignore. Daniel attempted to respond. Correlation is not proof. No, Ethan agreed calmly. But altered records, hidden transmissions, and matching access credentials create a pattern. The room became quieter with every word. Victoria watched faces around the table change from confidence to uncertainty. Then Ethan displayed one final report. Login histories, authorization records, internal approvals. The evidence connected directly to Daniel's executive credentials. Nobody interrupted. Nobody objected. Nobody moved. Daniel stared at the screen. The confidence that had carried him through the meeting slowly disappeared. Across the conference room, even the board members who had supported him looked away. Victoria felt a strange mix of disappointment and relief. The truth was painful, but it was finally visible. Ethan closed the presentation and stepped back. He did not celebrate. He did not gloat. He simply returned to his seat. For several seconds, nobody spoke. The room that usually echoed with arguments, negotiations, and competing voices had become completely silent. And in that silence, everyone understood exactly what had happened. 3 months later, autumn arrived in the small town with golden leaves drifting across quiet streets and cool air carrying the scent of wood smoke from distant chimneys. Life had returned to its familiar rhythm. Walker Auto Service remained busy. Ethan spent his days repairing trucks, helping neighbors, and making sure he was home in time for dinner with Lily. The attention from the corporate investigation had faded. News outlets had moved on. The board had completed its review. The company had recovered. Ethan preferred it that way. Recognition had never interested him. Peace did. On a Saturday afternoon, he stood outside the garage changing the oil in an aging pickup truck while Lily sat nearby working on a sketchbook balanced across her knees. The sky was bright blue, the kind of day that reminded people to slow down and appreciate simple things. Dad, Lily said without looking up. Do you think famous people ever get tired? Ethan smiled. Probably. Of being famous? Of being expected to be famous all the time. Lily considered that. That sounds exhausting. I imagine it is. The distant sound of an approaching engine drifted down the road. Neither paid much attention at first. Cars came and went throughout the day. But as the vehicle drew closer, Ethan recognized the sound immediately. Not because it was loud, because it was familiar. He looked up. A sleek silver sports car rolled slowly into the driveway and came to a stop beside the garage. The driver's door opened. Victoria Hayes stepped out smiling. Ethan shook his head and laughed softly. You change cars. Victoria glanced back at the silver vehicle. This one does not come with surprises hidden inside. Lily jumped to her feet. Victoria. She ran across the driveway and wrapped her arms around her. Victoria hugged her warmly. Look at you. You got taller. Dad says that every week. Because it is true. Ethan wiped his hands with a shop rag and walked toward them. What brings you back to town? Victoria looked around the property. The porch. The garage. The trees. The quiet life she had never forgotten. Maybe I missed the best mechanic in America. Ethan smiled. That sounds expensive. Actually, I came to thank him properly. She handed him a small envelope. Ethan opened it. Inside was a framed photograph from the board meeting. Beneath it was a simple plaque. To Ethan Walker. For integrity when it mattered most. Ethan stared at it for several seconds. Then he looked up. You did not have to do this. I know. The answer carried a warmth that had nothing to do with awards. Lily watched them carefully. Children often notice things adults miss. You know, she said thoughtfully. This feels a lot friendlier than the first time you met. Victoria laughed. You are probably right. Ethan remembered the town square. The joke. The Ferrari. The challenge that had started everything. She was not exactly impressed with me. Victoria folded her arms playfully. To be fair, you look like a mechanic. I am a mechanic. You know what I mean. The three of them laughed together. The sound drifted across the driveway beneath the afternoon sun. For a moment nobody spoke. The silence that followed was comfortable, peaceful, the kind of silence earned rather than forced. Then Victoria reached into her purse and pulled out a small folded piece of paper. I found something while cleaning my office. Ethan accepted it and unfolded the page. Written across it were the words she had joked months earlier in the town square. He looked up. Victoria's eyes sparkled with amusement. Remember that? Ethan laughed. Unfortunately. Lily leaned closer. What does it say? Victoria smiled. It was a very bad joke. Lily studied both of them before breaking into a grin. Well, if it helps, I think you two make a pretty good team. Ethan and Victoria exchanged a glance. Neither rushed to fill the moment. Neither needed to. The autumn breeze moved gently through the trees. Sunlight reflected across the garage windows. Somewhere in the distance, a church bell rang. And standing there beside the people who mattered most, Ethan realized that sometimes the greatest rewards arrive quietly, wrapped not in fame or fortune, but in respect, second chances, and the unexpected grace of finding your way home.